Welcome, everybody. So we are here as the Dartington Service Design Lab, LEAP community researchers, and we're talking about our experience of our research project, Pathways to Connections. So I'm Dawn, who's been kind of coordinating the project.
And I'm Anita. I'm one of the community researchers.
I'm Natoya. I'm one of the community researchers.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ella. I'm one of the community researchers.
So you chose as the focus of this research about connections, about the connections that parents make in their communities when they're bringing up their children. Why? Why did you want to explore connections?
I mean, we came together as a team, from Dartington, from Leap, us as researchers, and we had really brilliant ideas, and they were all linking to connections. We came up with a lot of ideas. They all linked to how families, friends, neighbors, how they connect, how organizations connect, how communities connect, how, so we felt as if we had no choice but to choose that topic of connections.
Everything is about connections. Our life in society, in any social groups, is all about connections. And I also realized, being a mother, I'm independent mother, lone parent. I've realized that it's quite isolating, like in a way, when you going through your maternity leave, for example, you are there with your child all the time. And it's very important to connect with other parents in a community, like in locally, just to make sure you share experiences, so you're not alone with whatever you're going through, because everything is so new, it's like a new chapter in your life. So it's very important to connect with other people just for support, or even for companionship and exchanging support and experiences in general. So I think everything we do in life is about connections. Connections are very important.
So as an approach then, you used a storytelling approach. So you didn't use what we might call more traditional sort of research in terms of questionnaires or anything, or focus groups. You went out and you collected stories in the communities. Why? Why did you choose storytelling as a methodology?
So basically the participants of the research, they are in charge. So this is something about power sharing that we are also very passionate about. We always remember interacting with the members of the community that it's very important to give them the voice. And we both agreed, we all agreed that storytelling was the best way of researching in this case.
Yeah, and just to come in with what Ella was saying as well, I think storytelling is very much about, like you mentioned, power and passing ownership to the people that we are talking to, so that they feel that they have a real voice, a strong voice, and that they're owning their own story. And, I think it's a very powerful thing when you ask somebody to tell them their story without asking, without any leading prompts, which is what we did. We had some prompts if we needed them. But
it's on their own terms. They choose how they want to say it and what they want to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that in itself was incredibly powerful. And I think it lends itself to really rich and dense data as well. And I know with the storytelling, initially, I think people required a little bit of reassurance from us, because when you do ask somebody to tell you their story, it's very empowering. But I think it fazed a few people. They were like, oh, wow, that's a really broad question. So I think just giving that reassurance that it's okay. You can tell us your story in whatever way, as long as you interpret that question the way you want to interpret it. And then I think when people got that reassurance, they were really happy to talk, especially the fathers group.
Yeah. Storytelling is it's a very authentic way of allowing people to express their ideas and their opinions. I also looked at Chiamanda Ngozi. Yeah, that lady who said the dangers of a single story. And one of her quotes was that a single story can create stereotype, which may be not untrue, but are not incomplete. So, if you get several stories, you're more likely to get the best picture.
So you had 2 target groups, didn't you?
Yeah.
They were
Fathers.
and
Eritrean and Ethiopia.
okay. Why those 2 target groups?
During our initial meetings when we started our project, we met with members of LEAP, and we as a team we worked together on identifying our target groups. And LEAP, from data they already collected, mentioned that probably fathers would be the least represented if it comes to people, members of community coming and engaging with the services. And they also mentioned Eritrean community, mentioning that there's not many people from this background engaging with services that LEAP know of.
Okay. When you went out then to do the research, to collect these stories, where did you go?
Cafes.
We went to lots of cafes
Yeah.
in the mosques there and churches, and that was very specifically related to trying to locate people that belong to the Ethiopian and Eritrean communities. And I think when seeking out that community, we did a lot of cafes as well, because we tracked down and did some research and groundwork on Ethiopian and Eritrean places to eat. And it seemed there were loads of cafes around where we thought we might find our target group.
And so you started as your first group with fathers. How did that go?
Fantastic.
It went better than we thought. I think, like you say, it was our first group, and I remember we were apprehensive. We spoke about it beforehand. We were like, oh, what if nobody wants to speak to us? How do we approach people? And we kind of, all these things that we had, we developed a question with a really good foundation, and there was really good reasoning behind it. But suddenly when you're about to do it, the doubt started to creep in about, oh, is this a good question? Yeah, of course it is. We got here by using a method, and it was, we properly brainstormed. And then, but despite that, we then approached our first father, who really wanted to talk. And to be honest, that's kind of with the fathers, that's how it continued. It felt like the fathers we spoke to really, really wanted to talk about their stories.
And where did you approach these first fathers?
We know Brockwell Park, and we know the playground, and we know that we have previously frequented that with our children. We've seen our target group there, so it felt like the obvious first step for us.
I remember we were at one of the meetings, we were kind of brainstorming as parents and taking our experiences, like where can we meet parents. And I remember, like with me, I think if it comes to doubts, I had this stereotype in my head that the dads only go out with children on the weekends, because normally we kind of believe that fathers are working and the moms are staying with children. So we also got really surprised when we went out to the fieldwork, and there was like lots of dads during the week with the little ones, and it was kind of amazing to see that. It kind of opened my eyes and kind of broke all those stereotypes in my head.
And just to add to that, Ella, because I think as the research progressed, we realised that there had been a shift because of lockdown and the pandemic, and that actually lots of dads started to work from home. And then even when restrictions got lifted, their pattern continued like that. So I think that lent itself again very well to us being able to find dads during the week who we wouldn't necessarily have found pre-pandemic.
So interesting. So Ella, you spoke about stereotypes and about changing your views with experience. And sometimes during the research, we spoke about unconscious bias. You able to come in and say about unconscious bias?
From my own experience, there were times during the fieldwork that I had to really go back and have a rethink, because I didn't get the results what I expected, or I didn't prepare for someone saying to me, oh, I don't want to talk today, or me feeling like I was intruding somewhere, on people's time. So yes, and I know in my head, it felt like I was being biased at times, but sometimes I wasn't aware of it, that I would say, oh, I'm expecting to hear from 10 fathers today or Eritrean group, but that did not happen. So I felt like, okay, it's beyond me. It's not something that, okay, it's a learning process. I didn't, like, I've not done this job before, so I'm learning, as I go along. So I think that area for me, the unconscious bias, was just a learning process.
Yeah.
I think what really helped was we reflected with each other
Yes.
as a team a lot throughout the process, and that helped to uncover some of our
Thank you
unconscious biases and kind of, again, I think reassurance amongst each other,
Yeah.
We had
reflecting,
similar
bringing out,
feelings.
Yeah. Thank you for adding that. I think that when I've like, after my a week of field work and we got back to the meetings, that's when I can bring my thoughts to the meetings and, express how my week was. And then I'm able to, remove myself and come back to. And because we live in a very multicultural society, well, community, London, and, there's so many different languages, there's religions, and it's very, very important that we know how to appreciate everyone's opinions, values, how we learn to. It is what keeps us connected, It is what really keeps us connected. I mean, it can be difficult to, some people can find it difficult to connect because of these barriers.
Yeah.
However, it's still important that we maintain respect for other people's cultures.
Yeah, if we stay open and we want to learn about others, not to assume, just to learn and then really meet people and actually get to know them and see what they stand for.
So we had the regular check-ins and reflections, which you said were helpful. What were the other benefits of working as a team?
Yeah, so general support and encouragement. We talk about safety at work, because when we go out to the field work, I mean, it's not advisable to do it by yourself. It's good to have that person, like second person to work as a team for, feeling safe as well, because we just go out there and we talk to people we don't know and we never know what we're going to encounter.
Yes.
So
I think we learn a lot from each other as a team, because I think we all come from different backgrounds and we have different experiences. So I think there's a lot of learning that we do from each other, and it helps us grow as individuals by being a team and learning from each other.
So I'm interested, you mentioned you're from different backgrounds. I'm interested, does that have any impact from the perspective of the people that you're researching?
of course. I mean, yeah, like I remember talking to Natoya a lot about approaching Eritrean and Ethiopian community, and we did kind of interviews with each other. We interviewed each other on one occasion about how we felt during the process of our work. And I remember Natoya shared with me saying that because she comes from Jamaican community, like Caribbean community, and she said that, like she felt like everybody could be kind of similar in terms of wanting to engage and talk to everybody, being very open. And when we went to research Ethiopian and Eritrean community, she was very surprised that the people were a bit more closed and they didn't want to speak and they were not very open. So I remember that kind of, if it comes to us being from different backgrounds, and we are kind of subject to the unconscious bias in a way, because of the people we surround ourselves with, and all of a sudden we go somewhere else to different terrain, and we meet different people from different backgrounds, and we can actually notice the differences at that point, and it's kind of very natural, I think, not to go into stereotyping.
Yes, but you know what is great about this role? This role is great because when we started, we were trained, we got training, and we talked about professionalism and how we're going to do our work. We spoke about how we're going to approach people, how we're going to respect people's opinions, people's values, and we maintained that.
And I think we're not necessarily your conventional research team. We do come from different cultures, minority kind of backgrounds as well. So I think, and we have been brought up, or some of us have been brought up in this country, but certainly we've spent a long time living in this country. So we probably, I know, face discrimination ourselves, so I think that really kind of lends, it's that lived experience of being here in this community, belonging to a different faith and culture and background. I think we have probably got a lot of empathy from that process. And it's, really fed into the way we approach people.
Yeah.
So moving on to this second cohort that you studied, the Ethiopian Eritrean communities, you've mentioned them a bit. That, in your experience, was more challenging to research with that group than the fathers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why? What was your experience?
I think the first aspect was the finding people. We at first we didn't know where to look, and again, it was always good to meet as a team and brainstorm and bring everybody together to generate ideas. And at first we thought, okay, if it comes to culture, there's food that is very important. So we think about the local restaurants and places where people can go and eat the traditional food. Obviously, if it comes to faith, so local places of worship. And I remember, because I was out for a while, I broke my foot, so I couldn't be inside of the fieldwork. But I also felt very included because everybody was feeding into, like what they were doing. And I remember Anita, who went to the Brixton Market to the different
mall
cafes,
and plaza.
and then people kind of gave you this amazing tip to go to one of the cafes in central Brixton where we found lots of people, and it was a very good tip. So maybe one of you. Want to expand?
We started out with, thinking where can we find the community? And it felt like Brixton Mall and Brixton Plaza had lots and lots of Ethiopian and Eritrean cafes or kind of hair salons.
Yes.
And we went along there, and we found lots of incredibly helpful people who really, really wanted to help point us in the right direction. So they weren't our target group, but they did belong to the Ethiopian and Eritrean community. And we were told about churches and mosques. We were pointed in different directions as to where we might find our target group. What I'd say is that the difficulties that we faced, so despite lots of people really wanting to help us and being very friendly, was that it did feel like the very public face of the Ethiopian and Eritrean community was very much kind of male and older male, and where and their advice, they were trying to point us out to where they thought we might find mothers with children. But ultimately, it was very, very difficult to come across, I think, that female population publicly in cafes and other public spaces. The other thing, we needed more time to build rapport, I feel, and trust. It's quite a lot to go in with that research question that we had and expect somebody to open up to you straight away
but that's
and tell you their story. And I think if we had more resources in terms of time, hours, then I think we could have got further by taking the time out to build trust and rapport.
So leading on from that, Natoya, are you able to speak a bit about the experience of going to the church?
Of course. That experience did take me back a little bit, because I felt that, when I went to the church, I felt like I was sort of invading, like it was their time. This is not, the church was full on the inside, but a lot of people standing outside around the church, but they were still praying, facing the walls and praying. We did not really realize that they were actually still worshiping outside. So we tried to go to them and to speak to them. And, I think that we may have stepped on their corn a little bit. I had to really take a step back and go away. And we decided to come back another week when we thought the meeting would have been finished so we can approach them again. I think it's important that we understand that it's important to them. Their faith is important, and that was their time. So it's not that we can come and just be, expecting them to answer questions around that time. So
it was a huge learning curve.
It was a huge learning curve. Yes.
Great. And then you did your data analysis and you pulled out key themes that emerged from the stories, and then you presented them as like a promenade performance in Brockwell Park, presenting the findings and quoting directly from the stories with the I statements and everything. Why didn't you do a PowerPoint presentation in an office?
Again, we are about progress and, presenting and doing things differently, not traditionally. We want to be very open-minded and try new things, and we're not afraid to do new things and try them out. And I remember when we met at Brockwell Park with the members of the LEAP, and it was like a big group, and I was just quietly observing everybody, and I could see people were like unsure, what are we doing here? Because people are used to a PowerPoint presentation in the office, and people were like probably not really sure about what they're gonna see and hear. And then we pulled out our amazing performance, and everybody was like amazed, and everybody loved to be out and about and involve all the senses into what we were presenting. So yeah, it was very exciting.
I think it felt more authentic as well, that kind of authentic and true to the type of research we're doing. So we're community researchers, and why are we going to be in an office doing a PowerPoint presentation when our findings relate to the real community?
Places.
So it felt authentic to use the community spaces, in order to present our findings.
Brockwell Park is kind of like a heart of the community. Everybody comes there, no matter what the background, age, and status in society. Everybody goes to the park. It's just a very common ground for the whole of the community.
Brockwell Park featured in our findings a lot. So yes, we did there to carry out research, but even when we weren't in Brockwell Park carrying out research, and in other locations, Brockwell Park featured a lot. Lots of fathers spoke about that park, and lots of people from the Eritrean and Ethiopian community spoke about that park when it came to connections.
So, nearly a year on now since you all started. What are your reflections now about community research? What does community research mean to you now, having had almost a year's experience and about to go into your second year of experience?
Should I go? During the work, I felt like I was always learning. I felt like I was constantly learning all the time. And when I look back on the methods and the topic, of our research, when we spoke about previously to our research, we spoke about power and inclusion. And I felt like the method and the topic just, it was just right. It sat right with us. It was allowing people to express themselves. It was giving power to the community.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, so kind of totally agree with you, Natoya, because again, I think I can come from a place of comparing to when I was a traditional researcher, carrying out systematic reviews as well, and drawing the comparisons between that very conventional research and this, what I think is very pioneering research that we're carrying out. And I think for me, community research means flipping things around. The society and the world in which we live, I feel, is like really top down in terms of there's a system of hierarchy in society, in research as well, and I think we're about flipping that around so that we can distribute power more equally, give voices to individuals who aren't ordinarily heard and who have very powerful, meaningful contributions, and reducing that there's a huge inequality gap out there, and trying to reduce that, and also show community research as being valid. I think traditionally this sort of research, the validity has been focused on those very more traditional kind of research methods. And I think now we are able to kind of pioneer and pave the way for us showing that community research is valid, voices of real people are valid and powerful.
Yeah.
It's more authentic again, and
again.
and we are we are insiders of the community we research in. So who can do it better than us? Like nobody from outside should come and carry on the research. So this is like giving power to us. We are part of the community.
I think it just teaches us how to reach people in a different way in our community. It's great.
So finally, what are your hopes and dreams for the next year? You've got another year now to kind of move on to next projects. What are your hopes and dreams for the next year?
I think that for me, it's like two parts of it. It's just the personal, what I gain for myself as a community researcher, as a human being, as a mother. And the other one is like about what we can give to the community, what we can give back. So, I'm just looking forward to learning more, expanding my knowledge and understanding of how communities work and how we can support them better. And so it's just generally like lots of learning and giving back to the community.
Ella said it lovely. I just want to see how much my knowledge will be expanded for the coming year. I've learned so much from this project, and I want to take all my skills and my learnings, into the next project. I'm excited to see what it's going to bring, and I feel a bit more confident that I'm able to speak more and reach out to people more. And, I feel like I've also even learned more about my community. Finding my ways around my community. And it's important also to remember that, there may be many barriers out there that people may face, whether it's through languages or financial or, whatever barriers are out there, cultural, whatever. It's important to remember that we all want the same thing. Most of us, we want our families to be safe, our homes to be safe. We want support. We want to make connections. And so I think that whatever project we go on into, it's going to all link to what we've started.
Primarily, feeling like, we've gained all this wonderful experience, like everybody's, already articulated. But using that to now be more confident as well as a team to pave the way for community research and really kind of fly the flag for community research, taking like a real solid place in the world of research where it belongs, I think. So those are my hopes and dreams.
Brilliant. So thank you, everyone. Let's sign off.
Thank you all for listening to our little podcast. It was great. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I will do it again. And it was just amazing. I hope that I can continue to build and grow, not just for myself and my family, but for my community as a whole.
And yes, Natoya, I hope we get to do it again too, because I've really, this has been a great process, and it's been great to share, our findings and our learning from the process with everybody, and learning that will inform the next project as well. And this, just to say as well, I feel like this has been a glimpse, just a small glimpse into what we have uncovered. So I do hope we get to do this again to kind of share more with you. So thank you.
And document it more, because I feel like this is a great way of documenting what we've been going through as a team and as a community researchers. So this is very valuable tool. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.